Hey, welcome to Ed, a podcast about the teaching life. This is Conversation 66, and I'm your host, Shane Lawrence. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB. And joining me this week is international teacher, curriculum designer, literacy coach, and so much more, Tonya Gilchrist. Hello.
Hi.
We got it. I got it.
Great.
That is seriously the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. This little tiny icon on the top right corner, it's like, yeah, they've just muted Google Hangouts for no apparent reason. So,
thanks a lot, Google.
Yeah, thanks, Google. Gee, that's okay. That's a new one, but now I know. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging in with me, Tonya. Appreciate it.
Oh, no. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, this is exciting. I know you're probably up a little bit earlier than maybe you want to be. I assume you're on vacation right now.
Yeah, somewhat. It's sort of not quite a true personal holiday, but we're in New Zealand for a convention with our church, some church holy days. So we traveled here from Japan. So it's definitely different from the normal work routine, but still really busy. But it worked out for the best because in Tokyo, I think it would have been like 5:30 a.m., before a work day, before going into school. So this is a bit better for it to just be like 8:30 a.m. here, a much more, normal time.
Much more humane.
Yes. So it all worked out.
Right on. Well, that's excellent. I'm glad it did. And I mean, we kind of dropped a bit of a bomb there. Let's just track this back here. But you're a teacher. You work in the education world. But I mean, how does an American teacher wind up in New Zealand by way of Tokyo? Can we just sort of hit the rewind button and how did this all come to be?
Sure. So yeah, I started teaching in the U.S. Back when I graduated from college, from university, and I taught in the U.S. for about, I guess it was 8 years. And I kind of really didn't know about the whole international teaching arena. I mean, it sounds a little silly to me now because obviously internationally they're going to need schools that still give I guess a quote unquote Western education, but I just never really thought about it. And teaching in the US had become, in the particular district I was in, I know it's so different state by state, but the district I was in had become more and more standardized test driven. And that was really hard for me as someone who's really passionate about inquiry-based learning and readers and writers workshop with student agency and all these different things that are a part of my personal teaching philosophy. It just wasn't happening in the district I was in, and it was becoming kind of suffocating. It was really a hard time. So believe it or not, I started Googling, like, what else can I do with my teaching degree, which now looking back is really sad because I love teaching. And I always, from the time I was in third grade, I wanted to be a teacher. So I never thought that I would be looking for what else to do besides teaching or besides something in education. But that was the point I was at. So that was definitely a low, but it ended up being a blessing because through that Googling, I discovered there was a whole nother world of international education, and particularly the International Baccalaureate program, which was completely focused on conceptual understandings and inquiry-based learning and teaching students, skills for life rather than just memorizing content. So I talked to my husband about it, and we were like, well, we've always loved to travel and always wanted the opportunity to live abroad. So let's do it. And we thought that we would just do it maybe for 2 years and then come back to the US. But I got a position in Thailand. So that's where we went first. And we spent 2 years in Bangkok. And then I got my current position in Japan. And we've been there just over 3 years now. So, and we love it, absolutely love it, and definitely want to stay for many years to come. So that's what's brought me to Japan, and I work at an international baccalaureate school. I'm currently a literacy coach there and also a middle school language and literature teacher. And then I also do literacy consulting work with Erin Kent Consulting, which she and now I with her work with schools all around the world, but particularly schools that are using Readers and Writers Workshop. So that's been really fulfilling as well and given me a chance to kind of really feel like I'm helping even just beyond my school. Yeah, so and then New Zealand, I'm here, like I mentioned, for some church holy days. My church has an international organization as well. So there are congregations all over the world. And some of our main holy days are in the fall. It's a Christian organization. So anyway, I'm here for those. And now's a chance while we're in Japan. This is our first time to New Zealand, actually. So we figured it's a way shorter trip from Japan than if we ever end up back in the U.S. So now seemed like a good time to come here.
Well, that's a pretty sweet gig. That's nice. So you came all the way. You went up all in Thailand. You kind of mentioned you reached this point where you said that you were kind of disillusioned with the teaching thing. Like what put you in that space?
Well, I felt like more and more. Both teachers and students were being given less autonomy and agency in what they were doing. I found myself in a situation where it was very much, okay, if you teach, sixth grade language arts, you're going to be doing this exact lesson on this day, exactly in this way, all to prepare for this standardized test. And it just felt very constrictive, and it felt like it was really taking the joy out of learning, and learning should be joyful. That's definitely something I believe. So it was really hard. It just wasn't, I felt like my philosophy as an educator and the reason why I was in education wasn't being met. And that was hard, if that's what you're doing every day, and yet you feel like you're not really being true to your principles and what you believe in. Yeah. So I definitely knew I needed a change. And then I just kind of stumbled upon the fact that there were all these international schools around the world, many of them focused on inquiry-based learning, that were looking for, experienced teachers. So the school I work at, because some people, and I know for listeners, maybe they will sometimes assume that if you're teaching abroad, then you're just teaching English, like as an additional language or something like that. But working at an IB school, it's actually, you're working with students who have moved abroad as well. And so they already know English for the most part. Most of them do. They're just looking for a more, for lack of a better term, a more Western education, so that when they graduate and have to move perhaps back to their home country, they have, a type of diploma that will easily transfer. They've received an education that kind of fits with that. So we might have, in fact, we do have students who are, from Norway, but their family works for an embassy. So they've moved to Tokyo to work for the embassy, but they still want an education in English, things like that. Right. So that's another aspect that's really exciting and fun for me. I feel like I'm always learning from the students as well, because our school, I think the last time I got the numbers from them, we have and teachers and students, 58 different nationalities. So there's so much variety just in your classrooms that you're working in. So I learn a lot from the students too, and about just their cultures and different experiences. And I feel like it helps a lot for the students as well. It keeps them more open-minded. We don't have a lot of the issues that you'd see perhaps in American schools with bullying and things like that, because they're all different. Like there's so much diversity that no one is singled out as being different because we're all so different, which makes it a really unique space as well. Yeah.
So how do you take advantage of that? I mean, you've got all these different perspectives and cultures. I mean, is that anything that sort of ever expressly enters into your classroom, sort of from an educational standpoint, or is it just sort of this is the way it is and this is how we move around?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, it certainly becomes a part of just who you are. So I'm at Tokyo International School, and at TIS, definitely having intercultural awareness and understanding, that's just a part of who we are. And oftentimes students will even say when they come to our school from another school, they love it and they're so happy because they notice that right away, that everyone is caring, everyone belongs. So that's something that's really positive about our school culture. But I do think even though it's a part of who we are, you definitely have many, many teachable moments where you're still explicitly pulling on those moments and teaching to it as well. In Readers and Writers Workshop, it might be, a certain read aloud that you pick that's all about, like, I know at the beginning of the school year, we've read some like Each Kindness, which is really by Jacqueline Woodson. That's really about showing a girl who doesn't show kindness to someone who's new and regrets it. So, you still have, I think, some of those same lessons that you'd be working with at any school, anywhere, with any makeup, doing mini lessons on talking about the importance of including others and respecting others and those kind of things. You definitely still want to do that, because I think it's important for kids to hear it from you and see you modeling it and, think deeply about it and all of that. But also, because there's so much diversity, it does sort of just become what you do as well. So I think it's a little bit of both.
And how does inquiry then slide into that? Because you said you're really big into inquiry, and in fact you actually contrasted it a bit with the standardized test learning. So what pushed you over in that direction, and how does that figure in your room?
Yeah, so in the classes that I teach and also the classes I coach in, we use the workshop model, the Readers and Writers Workshop model. So for anyone who's not familiar with that, the big idea of it is you have a mini lesson at the beginning that might be 8 to 10 minutes long. And then the majority of your class is what's known as the work period. And that's when the students are really digging in and trying things out. They might be working independently, or they might be collaborating with a small group or with a partner. And then you have share time at the end. That is usually just a quick, 2, maybe 5 minutes at the most, of sort of coming all back together as a class and reflecting and revisiting the work you've been doing. So the workshop model gives me a great opportunity to really amplify inquiry in my classroom, because it's not about, this sage on the stage teacher giving the students, all of my knowledge. That's not what it's about. It's about us learning together. So even within the mini lesson, it's the students are involved as a part of that. It's very interactive. Talking with them, and then they have the majority of class where they're trying things out. They're exploring different things. If it's, in a literacy classroom, it might be that in the mini lesson, we talked some about making inferences, and then they go to work with their reading partner or with a small group, and they're looking at a new text, but working on making inferences in that text. And then we can come back together at the end and share out some of the things we're going to carry with us, some of the things we learned. So it's much more, there's much more agency, because probably you'd also give them a choice of which text they're going to read. And their independent reading, they even choose, what book they want to independently read on their own. Of course, you as the teacher are there to conference with them and help guide them. But there's a lot more. It's very different from just everyone's doing this same one thing as a whole class. There's much more differentiation. And starting like with the mini lesson, we always start with, so rather than a teaching point of me just saying, today I'm going to teach you blank. Instead, you start it with a question like, today, the question I want us to explore together, or the question we're going to explore together is, and posing it as a question. And even though that's just a little shift in verbiage, I guess, it makes a powerful difference, because suddenly you're putting out there a question that you want to explore together, like you're exploring it with them, rather than telling them, I'm going to teach you this one thing and limiting them to that. So yeah, and then with the International Baccalaureate program, several key tenets of it. One of them is approaches to learning skills, which are skills like communication, creative thinking, critical thinking, collaboration. So we have those skills within our units of inquiry as well that we're focusing on. And usually, although all the skills are involved all the time, you'll usually zoom in on maybe 2 skills that you're really going to zoom in on in that unit. And so throughout the workshop class period, you can be pulling in times to really highlight those skills. Like maybe you've just done the mini lesson and you're about to send the kids off to work with their partner. And, you can remind them that today you're really going to lean on that skill of collaboration with your partner. So remember to think about what we talked about last week with what collaboration looks like and sounds like, and make sure you're pulling on that when working with your partner today. Something like that, that's quick, but a little link for them to remember these skills they're learning that they can then use for life, rather than just memorizing the content that day. It's more about empowering them with things they'll be able to use the rest of their lives.
So you mentioned creative thinking. I mean, I can kind of wrap my head around that because I feel like I'm kind of a creative thinker. Either that or I'm just very discombobulated. One of the two. But I mean, what does that mean for you when you talk to your kids about like creative thinking? What are you trying to tell them that skill is? Okay, we're going to get back to me and Tonya in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about a new podcast that's coming out called Otherwise. Otherwise is a variety podcast dedicated to empowering diverse communities living on Treaty 6 territory by sharing stories of our lived experiences. The show strives to highlight our collective ethno-cultural linguistic diversity and heritage, reflect who we are as a city, and bring about positive social change. New episodes will be launching at the end of this month. Find it in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And check it out at otherwiseshow.com. All right, let's get back to the show. But I mean, what does that mean for you when you talk to your kids about like creative thinking? What are you trying to tell them that skill is?
Yeah, so when we talk, I think that's a great question because I agree with you that it does sometimes feel like something that's just sort of mentioned, like thrown out there, but not always talked about. What does that actually mean? What does it actually mean to be a creative thinker? And so I think a big piece of creative thinking and what we talk about with our students at TIS is, it's partly about innovation, that you're willing to be a risk taker. We also have our IB Learner profile, and one of the profile traits is being a risk taker. So this idea of having a growth mindset, sort of embracing the power of yet, and being like, okay, maybe no one's tried this yet, but I have this idea that I'm going to try. So thinking outside the box, being willing to try new things, being creative in just how you approach a situation. Like many times, so to kind of think of everyday little things you might be doing. It might be that students are, working in their reading and writing journal or in their math journal or science journal. And maybe they've always approached their note-taking or their reflection in the same way, but having them think on a particular day of what's a different way you could do this, to just be willing to try, because you never know what you might discover. So really helping them to get away from all or nothing thinking, I think, is a part of creative thinking, that it doesn't have to be all or nothing, that there's not a fear there of failure, because you don't really fail, you learn. Even if something doesn't work, you're learning from it. It's all about learning. And I think that's part of creative thinking that's really important. You can't really go out and truly be creative if you're not willing to take some risks and know that it won't always work out perfectly, but what is perfect anyway, and that's okay. So having those kind of discussions together with the kids is really powerful and important, so that it becomes a part of who you are and a part of your culture, so that now students in our classrooms, like, they know they know the kind of environment they're in, and they know that it's okay to try stuff, and that what they're striving for isn't perfection. That's not what they're striving for. They're striving for learning.
Right.
And that's important. And a big piece of, I think, giving them the openness and like the freedom and agency to sort of go after creative thinking, when you take away the, I guess for lack of a better word, the scariness of perhaps doing something wrong,
Yeah. Well, it's funny that I don't think I've ever heard anyone really mention that before, but that's so core, I think, to the whole idea of what you're talking about. You mean, you're mentioning the idea of, just curiosity and getting kids asking questions and tackling things that they don't necessarily know what the end point is. And just the idea of getting over fear is such a huge thing for students, right? Just saying, I'm pushing this more and more in my own classes. And it's just the idea that, you can try this. And even if you don't know how it's going to turn out, or even if you think it's going to fail, that's okay.
Yes.
And it's not even, they're not worried about having to do things again. I think they're just worried of getting things wrong. They're just scared. So, I mean, how do you approach that with your students? And this is purely selfish because, I just feel like as I'm doing this more and more in my classroom, I feel like I'm kind of a salesman, where I'm having to say, you can do it. You can jump off this cliff without a parachute. Who knows? Maybe there's pillows at the bottom, or, whatever, like just trying to cleanse that fear out of them.
Yeah, I think, I think with not just with students, but so many points you were making, I was thinking, with all of us as humans, it's hard. Even as an adult,
Yeah.
there are times when it's really hard to go after something new because fear is holding you back. And so I think one piece of helping students understand it is being a bit vulnerable and sharing with them times that you've tried something new or tried something different or went out of your quote unquote comfort zone and the things you learned. Even times when it didn't work out the way you thought it would, it wasn't all, some magical, perfect thing, because again, it's not always going to be perfect, but you learned a lot. So I think sharing those moments with them and showing them that even as an adult, you're learning those things can be really powerful. Also, I think the more and more opportunities we give them, the more and more comfortable they become with that being a way they approach learning. So sometimes I think there can be a little bit of a disconnect because, again, we're all human and it's hard. And what can happen sometimes is a teacher might think like, yeah, I want to be, all for inquiry and all for like risk taking and a growth mindset, but then they're still really trying to control everything in their classroom. And you can't really have creativity and innovation in like a vacuum of control. You really kids need agency, they need choice, they need opportunities to try to like get a little messy. Like it's not always going to look, perfect because it's not perfect. And so I think helping the teachers get more comfortable with that and feeling like, okay, I'm actually doing an awesome thing here. I'm actually empowering my students by giving them more freedom. And that does mean at first it's going to feel a little scary for me. Like I'm going to have to be a risk taker too by giving them this control. But the more that we do it and the more used to the kids, the more used to those opportunities the kids get, the better it becomes. Because suddenly, like you mentioned, then they're not looking for the end result or how do I get, a perfect score on this or that. That's like that doesn't even factor into their mind anymore because they've gotten used to the fact that this classroom is a place where we're learning every day and we're always trying new things and we're asking questions that are open that we don't maybe know the exact answer to. So I think as teachers, when we give them more of those open-ended questions and when we give them more openness to just try it out and explore, then they naturally become more and more used to it. Whereas at first they might be a little like, wait, what? Like you said, you almost feel like you have to sell it to them because the sad reality is for many students, the majority of their education has not been that way at all. They've been in an environment where it's very much pass or fail. You need to, you need to learn the game of this classroom or this teacher and do it this particular way in order to be successful. That's often how students feel. They get a new teacher and they feel like they kind of have to, okay, let me figure out what this teacher wants and I'll just do that. And then I'll get a good grade. That sadly becomes, and for many of us, even when we were in school, that was the reality as well. So I think changing the environment is what then changes the students' perspective, because then they genuinely see, okay, this is now how this works. Like this is a place of inquiry. I can try different things. There's not one right answer I'm going after. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you brought up an interesting point too that I hadn't really thought about before, because we talk a lot about making this shift with our students, but at the same time, when you make that shift, I mean, it's a shift for the teachers as well. I mean, it is a scary thing. I made a big shift last year. I mean, I was not prepared, but I was bored and I was like, just burn it down. And I did, and I was left with, a pile of cinders and ashes. It's like, oh, oops. But there was some really cool stuff that we built up out of that. But I was not prepared, like you say, for that shift that I had to make as an educator, because all of a sudden I was left with, well, what's my job now? Because I'm not Sage on the stage anymore. I'm not, giver of assignments. I am now something entirely different. So, I mean, through this process, like, what have you discovered? What is your role?
Yeah, I think primarily our role is more as a coach. sometimes a facilitator as well, but especially as I think often a coach, because we of course still have, we are professional educators. We do have expertise. We have a lot of knowledge, and it is a part of our job to share that with students, but changing the way that we do it, where it's more about empowering them. It's helping them discover it, and also helping them build on their own background knowledge. By the time you're having students, well, really at any time, but especially once they're in, fourth, fifth, and then middle school, they have a lot of background knowledge they've built up. And sometimes if we're just taking I'm the knower of all things, dumping knowledge on you approach, we're not really pulling on their background knowledge, which then teaches them to never pull on their background knowledge, which is not helpful, because background knowledge is a super helpful thing to pull on in life for the rest of their lives. So, but I think they start to, in that kind of environment, they start to learn that, everything is compartmentalized. Like what I learned last year doesn't matter, because now I'm just getting all of this new knowledge from this new teacher, and I just need to forget everything in the past and just focus on this. Whereas if we start to become more of a coach, there's many more opportunities to really confer with kids in small groups and talk with them. First start, it's often so powerful to just start with a question, because then you discover how much your students actually know. Like before, instead of you just getting up and, showing them a slide on the screen or something on chart paper of what readers do to make an inference, if we go back to that example, instead of doing that, first asking them, how do readers make inferences, or why is it important to make an inference as a reader, and seeing what they tell you, because it's pretty incredible what they already know. And then that gives you the opportunity to stretch them way further than perhaps you would have in the beginning. So kind of seeing yourself as a coach, and coaching is really about empowering. Coaching is about helping people figure out what's already inside of them, and then how to take it even further, or how to go to the next level. So I think if we see ourselves in that role, a role of empowerment rather than just a role of giving knowledge.
I love that. I want that to sit for a moment. That's beautiful. Whenever I hear something that I really like, my first thought is always like, that's got to be on a T-shirt. Like, I don't know how I'd compress that, but that you just spoke a T-shirt right there. That was beautiful.
Thank you. Now, you made me think I have a friend who she always says with things like that. And she's not an educator, so just life moments where that happens. And she always says, I need to put that on a pillow. Like she's going to stitch it on a pillow or something. And I don't even think that she sews. It's just, but you made me think of her expression. Like that's what she always says. That needs to be on a pillow. So kind of the same idea. It needs to be on a T-shirt or a coffee cup or something.
Yeah. I got no excuse either. I mean, that'd be easy to do. Man, making T-shirts. Okay, there you go. New business.
There you go. Yeah.
Stealing quotes from all these idiots. Yeah. Everyone needs a side hustle.
That's right.
Oh, wow. Well, Tonya, this has been a great little conversation. I really enjoyed this.
No, thank you. No, it's been so much fun talking. I'm really glad we got to do this.
Yeah, well, me too. Well, maybe we'll do it again sometime. I wouldn't mind that at
all. Love to. I'm always happy to talk.
Great. Well, and if people do want to talk with you, maybe in a more digital sense, but where can people get in touch with you?
Sure. So I have a website that is just my name. So it's TonyaGilchrist.com. And that's a great way to get in touch with me. There's a little link on there to contact me if people want to reach out. It also has information about if anyone wants me to consult at their school. I do a lot of consulting work with readers and writers workshops, so just launching those at school, but also how to amplify inquiry within the workshop. And then another area I do a lot of consulting in is how to use readers and writers workshop in another language, so not just English. And then within your English workshop, how to use what we call translanguaging to help students who are multilingual, how they can pull on all their language skills. So lots of options there for different needs that there might be at a school. And that's all on my website. And then I do regular blog posts there too about just different passion topics or things that are on my mind. So there's a lot on there about learner agency and relationships with kids and and also like taking care of ourselves as teachers as well. A nice variety of blog posts on there. And then another place to get in touch with me or kind of follow what I'm thinking or doing is on Twitter. I try to be pretty active on Twitter. And my handle there is just at Mrs._Gilchrist. So at Mrs. Gilchrist. I think those are probably the two best ways to keep up with what I'm doing. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you very much once again. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you. Yeah, lots of fun. Always happy to talk education, and so much fun to connect with other people too.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're looking forward to seeing you out there in the Twitterverse and elsewhere.
All right. Thanks. Thanks so much, and have a great. Is it evening time there? If it's morning here,
it's 3:00 in the afternoon.
All right. Well, have a great evening then.
And you have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Talk
later.
All right. Talk to you later. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And this week's episode of Ed is brought to you by ATB. And maybe you're thinking of changing your career like Tonya did. Maybe you want to work for ATB. Well, ATB is hiring. Not only were they just named number 2 on Canada's best places to work list, but they're also diving deep into some creative and wacky tech stuff. You can check out ATB's LinkedIn page to see how you might fit in. All right, and listeners, if you want to get in touch or you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can email me at theedpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at theedpodcast. If you want to listen to more of Ed, you can head over to the website, theedpodcast.podme.com, or find us on Apple Podcasts. Just search up Ed Conversations. Ed is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network powered by ATB. You can find this and all other member podcasts at albertapodcastnetwork.com. Ed can also be heard on VoiceEd Radio. It's 24-hour internet broadcasting devoted to the best ideas in education. Just head over to voiced.ca. So, on behalf of myself and Tonya, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.